Let's talk about blood leukocytes. Leukocytes, leuko means white, cyte means cell, so leukocytes literally mean white cells. And we're specifically talking about the white blood cells that are found in the blood as opposed to in the tissue, which we'll learn a little more about when we get to the immune system. Now, white blood cells fall into two categories, granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granulocytes are cells that are filled with granules, and these granules, these little secretory vesicles, contain substances that are toxic to pathogens. So anytime you see a granulocyte, you're going to see a cell that secretes something as part of its function. Now, the three granulocytes that we find in the blood are neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. These each got their name not from any particular function. This doesn't tell us anything about what it does, but it tells us how they stain when you stain a blood smear. So neutrophils stain with neutral dyes. Eosinophils tend to take up eosin, which is an acidic dye, and basophils take up a basic dye. And this was the only way that scientists who were originally studying these cells could differentiate between the cells, is just based on which dye the cells liked the most. And subsequently, scientists discovered more about their functions. Neutrophils are by far the most abundant white blood cell that we have circulating. And because they are so numerous, they are usually the first to appear at any site of infection. So there are, in some ways, our first responders. They secrete bleach and peroxide, the same substances that we use in the household, and those things are toxic to the pathogens and also to our cells in the body. Neutrophils are also capable of phagocytosis of bacteria. And if you see somebody with a high neutrophil count, it usually points to a bacterial infection because this is their specialty. Eosinophils are active or more numerous in allergies. They're involved in fighting parasites and fungal infections. You see them elevated when fighting off cancers. And they have a general role in inflammation, which is the way to call for help from the immune system. Eosinophils secrete a mixture of several different toxic proteins, proteins that when released are damaging to the pathogen. Basophils are also involved in allergies. We often see involved in autoimmune disorders where the immune system attacks our body, are also involved in inflammation or calling for help. And they secrete histamine, which is a vasodilator that's part of calling for help. That makes the vessels dilate and brings more blood to the area. And they also secrete something called heparin, which is an anticoagulant, a thing that prevents clotting. And we'll see why this is important when we get to the immune system. Now, the histamine that brings all the blood to the area is ultimately responsible when you get allergies for your puffy red nose or your puffy red eyes. Because it's bringing more blood to the area where it's fighting off an allergen, whether that allergen is actually harmful or not. The last thing I want to say on this screen is that while my drawings are not terribly accurate, you can compare them to what you see in the textbook. Neutrophils are easy to identify because they almost always have a three-lobed nucleus. And the granules, while they're in there, they're very difficult to see. You would almost think it didn't have granules. Eosinophils have so many granules and they stain pink or orange, depending on the dye or the composition of the dye. But there's so many granules in there that you almost don't see the nucleus at all. And same thing with basophils. Basophils are so full with these blue granules that you usually don't see the nucleus.